welcome to TalkWrite. I'm your host, Wayne Stennett, and with us tonight we have a fellow that's came a long way to be here. Nick, why don't you take over and introduce our guests for us?
All righty. With this TalkWrite, we're returning to our original concept for this show, which was bringing together an author with their narrator. Talk and write. And we have A.J. Stewart and Paul Heitsch, who once I did a little research for this and I looked at his headshot, I was like, I think I've had a beer with this guy at some Audible event at some point. He looks familiar to me. But we have A.J. and Paul, and they've been narrating. Paul's been narrating for A.J. for a while now, and we're going to hear a little bit about each of them. A.J., I understand you have 3 main series, but also there's a fourth, a spinoff. Can you tell us a bit about the various series you've got and which ones Paul has narrated for?
Yeah, so I've got the main series that I have is the Miami Jones series. That's what most people will know me for. Miami Jones Florida Mysteries. I also have a action adventure series, the John Flynn series, another mystery series, which is the Baskin Island Mysteries. That's a series of one book so far. And I have a new series coming out, which is a spin-off from the Miami Jones series, which goes back to the 1980s. And follows 2 of the characters back in the 80s in their military adventures, and that's called the Lenny and Lucas series. But it's the main series, Miami Jones, and it's my longest running series. That's the one that Paul has. Paul is the voice of Miami Jones. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I've got a really good question. When are you going to run out of titles for the Miami Jones series? There's only so many football plays.
Yeah, well, I've the benefit of him is I move from book to book, and I tend to place it in the world of a different sport each time. So I've started to I use a phrase that's known in that particular sport. So, for example, the latest book that we just did, that Paul and I just did, was called Making the Drop. And it's based around the world of the International Surfing League, the World Surfing League.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know anything
thought they
about
were
that.
all football titles. The
No,
early ones were all football.
Some of them are. Certainly the first one is. The very first book in the series is called Stiff Arm Steel, and that's ripped directly from the Heisman Trophy, which is the MacGuffin in that particular book. But other than that, many of them there's a few football ones, but a few of them go through a lot of different sports, because I actually come up with the titles after I've written the book, or during the book, because I learn the phraseology of the sport. I like to look at sports that I don't really know that well, and I also like to look at the angles within those sports that you wouldn't think of. So, for example, we have a book that Paul and I did together that is called Big Thor, and it's based around ice hockey, a minor league ice hockey competition. And I didn't know a lot about. I know a little bit about hockey, but that particular book looks at it from the eyes of the man who makes the ice, rather than the people who play the game. So I like to kind of look at it just a little bit differently, to just make it a little bit more interesting than just the obvious. So.
The Zamboni driver.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the big finale of that particular book actually involves a Zamboni chase. If you will believe that. So, yes.
So, how long until we get a Highlight book?
Well, that was the second one. That was like the second or third one, wasn't it?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There is a Highlight?
Yeah.
Book 3 is actually called Highlight, and as in Highghlie, Highlight, a play on.
I did not get that. Wow. Okay, fine. How about curling?
Curling we haven't done yet. Curling we haven't done. So
Pickleball.
South Florida curling.
Yeah.
Pickleball will be the next one.
Oh, that's right. You got to get David Behrens in on that. I know he ends up teaching pickleball. That's awesome. Paul, let me jump over to you. Now you've done a ton for AJ, and as I understand it, Cruise Control, which is the latest audiobook to come out, is your 350th audiobook.
Yes.
So that's pretty cool that you hit that. You hit that high bar there with AJ.
I was really, I knew that was coming up, and I had some books in the queue, and I was really hoping that would be the one that dropped right at 350, and it was, yeah. So,
well, let me ask. So, we've got you and we've got AJ on here, but I would be remiss if I didn't take a look at some of your other stuff. I myself do a decent amount of space operas, and you've done a lot of space opera, probably twice as much as I have. So you've got these awesome sci-fi books, and some of them, I guess, are through Podium, and they look like they have a lot of listeners.
Yeah, the first space opera series I got was for Joshua Dalzell, his Omega Force series, and he had another series called for the Black Fleet Squadron or something with Mark Boyette, who's just a terrific narrator. And so that's where Joshua built his fan base, and then they all kind of came scrambling over to the Omega Force books, and so we kind of built that audience with his existing audience, and then that audience also grew organically. And Joshua is in a, writers are in communities, and Joshua's community is sci-fi writers, so he referred me to a lot of his buddies, and we did one of his books for Podium. The rest are for either ACX or Audible Studios. And that just kind of grew organically from that original relationship. And it's one of my favorite genres. I mean, I read a ton of space operas and other sci-fi growing up. And his are, it's kind of like, his writing reminds me of AJ because it's very character based, and there's a lot of humor in the dialogue and in the description, and I really enjoy that. I love getting something that's really snarky and wry to perform.
Now you're actually in your studio, right?
I am.
Recording studio.
This is where the magic happens. It's a 4-foot by 5-foot booth in my basement.
Nick's is in his spare bedroom upstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a 2-bedroom home that is now a 1-bedroom home.
Well, your microphone sounds awesome. I just got my fancy Shure microphone working again. I don't know if you can tell the difference. I hope you can tell the difference. I paid a lot of money for
it. Yeah.
Well, Paul, let me ask you, do you have any special items inside? I've got all sorts of fun little things inside my booth. Do you have anything to show?
I have this, which is something my daughter made for me. This is a wood frame, and she stretched a canvas over it and painted this. And she's a graphic artist, and as a kid, she drew these cartoons of a superhero called Super Duper Daddy-O.
That needs to be a book.
So well, she actually like drew some comic books of Super Duper Daddy-O coming in and like cutting everyone's pancakes into bite-sized pieces and saving the day. So for a birthday or a Father's Day present or something, she made this for me. And the other thing I have is a postcard that I got in the gift shop of the Brandywine Museum outside of Philadelphia, and it's Jamie Wyeth's portrait of a pig. and
that's a big one too.
Yeah, I keep that to remind me that it's possible to make art out of any subject, and that I owe it to every book that I'm given that I'm trusted with to make art out of it. And I never have to worry about that with AJ's books. AJ's books are a gift because I can I always know I can settle into the book and never have to worry about helping it or trying to make it more than it is. But in 350 books, you're going to get some where they need a little help. And some of them are fiction books. A lot of the nonfiction books are kind of dry and scholarly, and so mustering up the energy for 10 or 12 or however many finished hours to really try to impart the passion that the author obviously has for the subject matter because they wrote a book about it, but they have to try to impress all their academe friends. So that's why I keep the pig in here.
That's good.
Make art. And
although I think if I had a pig in my studio, I would look at that and go, that's reminding me that I've been seated and not moving or burning any calories for the past 3 hours. I probably should go outside.
I have an app that reminds me to get, and in fact, it's telling me right now it's time for me to get up and take a break for 10 minutes. So
that's good.
I'll send you a Zoom link Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Nick, at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you can join me in the gym.
Yeah, that's gonna happen. Okay. My exercise today was cleaning up the trash that the bear took from my neighbor and brought over to my lake lawn because it's nice and dark over there. So I was like, oh my God, what is that out there? So that's my exercise, cleaning up bear stuff.
I ended my exercise this morning with 170 pounds barbell squats.
If you'd been out there while the bear was still busy, you'd have gotten a lot more.
You got a lot more exercise.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and a friend of mine was like, "Oh, it might have been a raccoon." I'm like, "Nope, I saw the scat. There's a big old pile, and that's not a raccoon scat." All right, well, we've gone way off the line here. Let me get back. So, will there be more in the Baskin Island mysteries? For those of you watching who read the Tropical Authors books, AJ came in on Faceless. I love Faceless, one of my favorites. And that is based on his character in the Baskin Island mysteries. But there's only been one book so far. So let me ask, what's next?
There is a book planned. We've got it in the publishing schedule for a release at the end of next year. Unfortunately, it's one of those ones that we've had the cover for about 12 months now, and Stewart, who did the cover for that one, he's very patient with me, and I've told him that I like to have his covers sitting in front of me when I'm working on the book, because it really paints a picture for me. That one there, if I can point at that is one of Stewart's works, and that's it up there.
Oh, nice.
And he does great work. And it was actually, that cover actually became where Sam lives on Baskin Island, which, for those who know the Fort Myers, Cape Coral area, it's not real. It's fictional. I didn't get it wrong. It's just literally not there. It's kind of an appropriation of North Captiva. But I wanted an island where we could do things that maybe I didn't want to actually do to a real place in due course. So, so the first one, Clearer Waters, did great. And it was great to write Sam again in Faceless, which was, the Tropical Authors book that we did together. That was such a hoot to write, and made me really keen to. I wasn't sure whether we'd do a second Sam Waters book, but after having written her into Faceless, it became obvious that I had another story to tell about the mysterious death of a former British rock star who passes in South Florida in very suspicious circumstances. So that's slated for end of next year.
As a lover of the British invasion, in my youth with the music. I will read that. I will read the heck out of that. Let's see. Can you tell us a little bit about the John Flynn? So I think a lot of listeners will know about the Miami Jones books, and I certainly know about them. But the John Flynns, are they a Jason Bourne kind of thing, or is he more of a PI, or is he, what is the nature of these books?
Imagine if Jack Reacher had to join the French Foreign Legion.
Okay.
He'd be too tall. They wouldn't allow that.
Yeah, well, my guy is actually a little bit shorter than Jack Reacher, but a little bit taller than Tom Cruise. So
that's a big gap.
Yeah.
5'6" and 6'5".
That's right. Yeah, so it's a sort of a military action adventure based around an American soldier who, through a series of circumstances, ends up joining the French Foreign Legion and becomes a leader of an elite terrorist hunting group. And then in the very first book, it's actually called The Final Tour, and it's about the last tour that unit does together. And then the rest of the books, there's another 4 in that series so far. They go on to look at adventures that he has after he leaves the French Foreign Legion, a little bit like the Reacher story.
Were you ever in the military? I
was not. No, I came this close to joining the Australian Army to play in the band. I was a saxophone and clarinet player when I was at school, and I got chatted with some recruiters about joining the band, but it never came to anything. I'm not sure I was a good enough player to join the military band, because those guys can play.
That's all they do.
I got a buddy of mine from high school who was in the band with me, and I sort of lost touch with them. And then later I was like, oh, he's like the drummer in the military band. And then about 10 years later, I'm like, oh, he's a drummer in like the past 10 years of Broadway shows.
Wow.
Those guys are good. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the bar is high. Yeah.
Paul, let me ask you, because I was looking, you got books, you've narrated nonfiction books about JFK and Napoleon, and a psychedelic thing about Timothy Leary and how his eating of mushrooms ties into the Tibetan Book of the Dead or something.
Yeah.
But what I want to know is, what is your favorite, because I can't ask you your favorite fiction book, because that would be AJ, of course.
Well,
What is your favorite nonfiction audiobook project you've done?
That's probably the biography of Van Gogh.
Oh, wow.
Van Gogh. Right. That really introduced me to the world of art generally, and his story. I mean, it's a very difficult story, because he led just a tortured life. He clearly had some kind of mental illness that was exacerbated by syphilis, and he spent his whole life basically as an outsider and an outcast, and didn't enjoy any success until after he was dead, and but really being immersed in the events and the process, and seeing how his art evolved, from the very, very dark palette and washed out subject matter that he started with, to the vibrant colors and just the beauty that he was finally able to see and depict in the world was fascinating. I also got to learn how to pronounce a lot of words in Dutch. A friend of mine has a friend who lives in the Netherlands, and so she connected me with this woman, and the woman was nice enough to go through the list of Dutch names and terms and record them for me, so I was able to mimic that for a kind of authentic rendering of the Dutch words. And I just did another one also about painting called, and I really like this one because it reads like a caper, called The Forger's Spell. and it's about this guy Hans van Meekeren, who was just a mediocre Dutch painter who painted, like almost hotel art for rich patrons. And he was passed over by the elite art world of his day. So to kind of get back at them and also to make a bunch of money, he forged Vermeers. He forged paintings in the style of Vermeer, and then was able to pass them off as undiscovered Vermeers from his early period. And he was really clever about it. And then his downfall came. This was during in the late 30s and throughout the Second World War. And his downfall came after the Second World War, when the Dutch authorities were looking for collaborators with the Nazis and prosecuting them. And many of them were executed for collaborating with the Nazis. And they were, being Dutch, they were very thorough with checking paperwork, and the Germans were very thorough about keeping paperwork. And they found a receipt for a painting that he had sold to Goering. And so they came to his house and arrested him, said, you sold this Vermeer, a national treasure, to Goering. And he was like, no.
It's a fake. I painted.
I forged it. And so then he goes on trial. He has to demonstrate how he's forging these Vermeers. And in the meantime, the art world was going nuts over these forgeries that they believed were genuine Vermeers, and they were in museums in the Netherlands, and one was bought for the equivalent of $9 million by the museum. They got a syndicate of people together to put up the money to buy this thing.
And that would also make all the originals suspect also.
Well,
now, is this audiobook? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, if you look at his paintings and you look at a real Vermeer, there's no comparison. That was the truly. But once you know it's a forgery, it's like, of course it's a forgery. There's no way this was painted by a true master. But he was just, it was a whole Emperor's New Clothes thing, and people were dying for Vermeers. It was almost like the tulip craze. They had found an unknown Vermeer like 20 years before this. That was a huge event. And so he was also looking at that and thinking, man, if I can convince people that there are more of these undiscovered Vermeers, I could make a fortune. So it's just a fascinating story. And the guy Ed Dolnick is the writer. He does a great job of spinning it out it's very cinematic in the way the narrative plays out. I really enjoyed that one.
And this is different than Stealing Rembrandts, which is one of the ones that caught my eye when I was looking at you. So you've done several art heist forgery.
And one about what's his name? Frans Hals, the Dutch master portraitist. So yeah, I've had a chance to do a few books about the art world, which is something I knew nothing about. That's what I really love about nonfiction, is how much I learn that I would never in my life have had any interest in or desire to read about. But because people are paying me to read these books, I learn all kinds of stuff, and most of it's pretty fascinating.
I did the math, and 350 audiobooks is equal to about 5 or 6 months of just constant talking.
Yeah.
That's a long time. And Nick, you've done what, 500 or 600, right?
600 plus, but
wow.
I was trying to explain to somebody, they're like, I looked at Audible. How have you done? I've been doing it since cassette tape, and they've redone a lot of stuff. So, much as in the same way you couldn't tell Kevin Bacon that he had not done Footloose because there's been a new version of Footloose. I've done a lot of books that have since been redone in a digital format. But yeah, it's been a long time. But 350 is a lot. And I looked at when you started, and you certainly do more books day to day than I do. because I think you're at 350 in half the time that I was at. So I'm impressed. Let me see. I feel like we got to get back to AJ here. I have a question, and just for our listeners, I already cleared this with AJ because I wanted to know if it was okay. So we know AJ as Tony, and there's a question a lot of authors come to when they start is, do I use my name or do I not use my name? And I personally was curious. I went with my own name because I thought the fact I was a narrator would benefit me, and the connection of the names would have a positive for me. But AJ, why not go with Tony Stewart, which is a great name? Why'd you go with AJ?
So we didn't go with Tony Stewart primarily because when I released
driver.
exactly why. When I first released the first book back in whenever it was 2012, Tony Stewart, the NASCAR driver, was still driving the car and was very popular and very well known. And I thought, well, everyone's just going to confuse it with him, and that might be a good thing because it might sell a lot of books to people who think it's him. He also had a lot of people who were not his fans. And so I didn't want to drive those people away. So that was kind of a non-starter from the beginning. And so I just went with AJ. It's actually my actual initials. My full name is Anthony John, and my mother wanted Anthony. There's no H. It's just Anthony. It's the traditional sort of English. And my dad thought that was a way too pompous of a name. So he said, you can do it, but we're going to call him Tony. And that's what I've been called my entire life. So when it came to, creating the name, it was, okay, so Tony's not really going to work. Somebody's got that one. And Anthony sounds a little bit pompous for a South Florida detective. So let's go with AJ. And the other benefit was that I'm other than the writing world and with my readers, I'm not known as AJ. Nobody knows me as that. As you just said, Nick, everybody calls me Tony once they get to know me. And the benefit of that was that Tony Stewart is me, the person, and AJ is the writer. And especially when I was starting out, it was kind of important for me to have that sort of mental separation. Mm-hmm. Because when you start out, especially, and even a little bit now, but it's much less now because I've got a much thicker skin than I used to have. But you're afraid. You're writing these words down, and you're kind of putting your heart and soul into it, and you put it out into the world. And some people anyway, have a tendency to tear it down, and that can be terrifying. It can be debilitating, and it can stop you from writing. And so I felt like AJ was this other person who, once the book was done, he was out there, with his name, and that wasn't me. And so if you said you didn't like it, that's okay. You don't have to like my books. Not everybody does. But you're talking to a completely different person. You're not talking to me. Because if it were me, I'd probably crawl up into a little fetal ball and cry for a week every time I got a bad review. So there was kind of a psychological reason, I guess, to free myself up from the downside of putting your work out there, because it's a big step. Now I'm about 30 books in. I'm 10 years or so I've been doing this. I don't have that anymore. I don't really care about it anymore. I get a book done, I put it out there, and the world likes it or doesn't like it. I know there are people who love my work, and I know there are plenty of people who don't. And the people who don't, there's lots of other books out there, and they should go and find something that they enjoy. And the people who do, I'm writing for you. And that's it. So I've managed to get over that. But that back in the day, that was a small but kind of important step in the process, I think.
Good answer. Wayne, we don't have any questions on YouTube.
Okay. Well,
at the moment.
We're at the bottom of the hour, and Greta is making salmon, and that can't wait.
Oh. Wait, no, but I have one important.
We got 10 minutes max.
Okay. this is the thing we like to do with our narrators.
Oh, yeah. We forgot about that.
Yes. So I got to ask Paul, what is your favorite accent to do? And what is your kryptonite accent to do?
I do like doing the Aussie accent. I love doing a Russian accent. It's just it just uses the whole mouth, and there's also just an attitude behind anyone who's speaking English with a Russian accent that I just love getting into. My kryptonite is probably British. I can do a decent Irish. I can do an okay Scots, but anything in England proper is hard for me because I can't. It is very regional. If you're a Geordie or if you're Estuary or if you're RP or if you're Cornwall or whatever. I mean, the dialects are very specific to kind of small geographic areas, and I find I can never just lock into one particular accent. So and I also I kind of lose track of how have I been voicing this character or that character. It's just there's no anchor point for me with British, with English, like there is with Irish. Irish, you have rhotic R's and you hit the T's. And in Scots, you have the rolled R's and you drop the T's. And it's so they're like, you know, when you're spotting a plane or a bird, they're like little details that are unique to each one that help you identify what it is you're looking at. I have those with Irish and I have those with Scots. I don't have that with any English accent. And I always kind of dread having to voice it. Tony wrote a character. I think that was in Offside Trap that you described as having a plummy English accent, and I felt like I got that guy completely wrong. But I voiced him as kind of a Cockney who had come up in the world through his life of crime. And then you described him as plummy, and I thought, no, you want him to sound like an aristocrat who's like slumming in his life of crime. But it worked out okay.
I think it worked out really well, and that's one of the interesting things that you kind of discover as you go through this process is that the audiobooks are a completely different medium. It's not. There's a difference between read by and performed by, and I could do my own books. I could read my own books. I have the capacity to read, but I could not perform
exactly
Miami Jones the way that you guys can perform your characters. You know, that's a great example because I've listened to, you know, that I haven't listened to Offside Trap in quite a long time, but I remember at the time thinking that you've nailed all of these characters. And I don't, whether it's plummy or not plummy, I don't even know. I can't even remember what I wrote, but I know that you sell the character. That's one of the things that's been interesting for us lately is I didn't start doing audiobooks until I had maybe 5 or 6, I don't know, books out already. And then what we started doing was we went back to the beginning and recorded the first book and then the second book. But there was quite a gap between those recordings. And I think I was writing them a little bit faster than we were getting around to recording them. So the library was growing bigger. The ebook library was growing bigger than the audiobook library. And people were getting through the first few and then emailing me saying, where's the next one? Where's the next one? Where's the next one? It's like, well, you can't jump 6 books ahead because that's the next one.
Got to do them in order.
Yeah. So what we ended up doing, and we haven't quite finished this, but we hopefully will by the middle of next year. Middle of next year is we do all of the ones that we release now, obviously when they come out, so they come out at the same time as the ebook. But we went back and started to fill in the gap between the ones that 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever. was it Cruise Control that you just did that was your 350th book was book 9 in a series that is 17 in it. And one of the great parts for me is that I wrote that book about 5 or 6 years ago. And
So
I had
like listening to a brand new story.
completely, I had no idea what was going to go, what was happening. Paul said to me, shoot me some character bios because then I can, get a feel for who any of the non-recurring cast. And I thought to myself, well, I don't even know who's in this book. So I went quickly through my Scrivener files and went, okay, there's that character and that character and that character, and sent you a bunch of stuff. And then when it comes back to me, I don't listen to the files, like go through them, because that's one of the benefits when you work with a professional like Paul. You don't have to worry about quality control. That Paul is the quality control. He takes care of that. So these files are ready to go. What I do is I start listening to them at each first chapter just to make sure that the file name matches the chapter. And I don't even need to do that because it has literally never been a mistake, but I'm a little bit anal compulsive about that stuff, so I do it anyway.
A lot of chapters too. So
well, and what I find is this, and it happened with Cruise Control. It's been so long. I hit the button, chapter 1, and then you start reading the story, and then suddenly I realize that it's the end of the chapter, and I've just listened to the entire chapter because you pulled me into the story.
And wait till you get to be my age. Then the book that you just wrote is a new story when you listen to
it. By the time you end, what is the beginning of the story? Yeah. But it's fantastic. That's been one of the fun things about going back and doing the backlist a little bit, is that I'm getting to hear some of Paul's work as if it's new. And it's fantastic. Like he brings it alive. And that to me is the difference, as I said, between a read by and working with a lesser actor or someone who's just reading the book versus someone who is actually an actor, and a performer and understands this is a different medium and you need to bring these characters to life. And I love the way that good actors do that in all the books that I listen to. But I can't even begin to say how lucky I am to have such a great actor working on my stuff, because it does make it sound better than it really is.
Thanks.
I've said it many, many times before. Nick's narration has completely changed the way I write. I write dialogue now with a lot more intent, a lot more forethought on how he's going to make it sound. And it just comes out a whole lot better.
I believe it. Yeah.
Well, we are in overtime and Greta has dinner on the table, so we got to go. Thank you guys for being on here with us. It's been a lot of fun. And as always, Nick, thank you for helping me get through this. As y'all can see, I'm without my glasses today, so Nick's been doing most of the work as he usually does. But thanks for being on with us, and thanks to our sponsors and supporters, Down Island Press, Aurora Publicity, How Not to Sell,
Pirate Radio, Tropical Authors.
Why don't you just do this, Nick?
I think that's it right there.
That's
the 5, right?
Every time I do this, I see that little note board in your background right there. I think, why don't you just write it down and put it right here put it on the corner of the screen, and I can just read it off. But anyway, thanks to everybody who supports our show, and thank you, AJ and Paul, for being on with us.
Thank you for inviting me. This was wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Y'all have a good evening. Good night, everybody.
Thank you all.